want to welcome all of you. First of all, I want to thank Markus for putting this together and inviting the guests, along with Sarah and Robin and Marie-Catherine and members of the Communications Committee. We have a great group of people today. We want to welcome Isla Mundell Perkins, who is the casting director in Hamburg. Erik Malmquist. Erik is the head of casting in Munich. And then finally, the one I've known the longest, Michael Barobeck, is the director of artistic operations in Graz. This has been a very trying time in our profession. They're having to rethink the way business is done. And I'd just like a quick question to the three of you. I'd like to know how you feel the profession has changed in the past 2 years.
I feel like there are endless answers to that question. I mean, there are so many things that so many ways you could approach that. From my side, of course, that there are budget cuts. I mean, we've all seen what's happened in London recently. I think that's been very much on everyone's minds. And I think a lot of us were at the Deutsche Open conference at the same time that was happening and being announced. And my major frustration then was actually the fact that we weren't talking about the fact that that might have just happened in London, but it's something we're probably going to have to get our heads around in Germany. I think the short answer to that question is that the pandemic's exacerbated every crisis that was coming, surely, for our industry anyway. And then also from our side, but the insecurity of the fact that planning changes, we're having to react differently to like what we actually plan and what people are coming to see and what people want to see on the stage. And we're kind of having to analyze that a lot more, I think, closer to like less far into the future. And then the last thing for me is, of course, the stamina of singers who haven't had a chance to like be on the stage doing what they're meant to do. Long COVID, the way that affects people, the way that people are now thinking about mental health and work-life balance. These are just everything. The landscape's shifted drastically, but at the same time, I still feel that we're trying to plow on with the same thing in a way. Right. And we're not necessarily adapting.
Because for the middle-sized houses, I do realize that the planning is much behind schedule. In Graz, we do have change in the management next summer. So this is just the usual thing that happens when a new artistic director is appointed. So we are for sure behind schedule.
I mean, the business was planning so crazy far out for so long, and I think it was a really negative impact on singers' careers and lives. And the fact that we're now being able to sort of reassess that type of planning, I think is probably, I don't know, the net asset for the singers in general. I do think that there's a bit more pressure on the other side to fill up the diary for those next 6 years, because, of course, that year of uncertainty that we all experienced has left us all sort of traumatized.
Our managers are very frustrated at the lack of auditions that we are able to get right now. The big fear that they're having is we're creating a generation of singers that are getting no opportunities to make debuts, let alone even get auditions.
Also, I feel that we get a little bit more value from seeing performances than from hearing auditions, although I think both are important.
So this idea of discovering a new young singer, you have a young singer that just gets out of Juilliard, has not had that opportunity to be on stage, so you could hear them in a performance, and yet they can't get a general audition.
But I wonder whether there's a more coordinated way that we could go about making sure that there's a more direct link between the casting industry, as it were, and people at that stage who are, you know, maybe just very newly represented.
Yeah, let me jump in about the casting issue. What is the best thing for all you three to discover people?
As you know, our repertoire is rather small, so I don't need too many guest singers. We have a rather stable ensemble, so they stay with us for a couple of years. And for the guest singers, which I need from season to season, I usually do have certain ideas in mind. So the MP3 files and the YouTube made my life much, much easier than it was 10, 15 years ago.
But especially for a larger role or whatever, I think in the end, we'd always want to hear it live, and every house has a kind of unique acoustic. And even though I'm relatively good now at sort of judging how a voice will translate, there are always still those surprises. Sarah, sorry, I see you have your hand up.
Oh yes, thank you. Hello everyone. Hi, Isla. You were saying that you go around to hear singers. I'm surprised to hear that. I mean, one of the things that we do as artist managers, and I in particular do, is go to the young artist programs. So the conservatories are one thing, but really the young artist programs is a bit of a seeding out, if you will, for better or for worse. But, you know, Santa Fe, Glimmerglass, Houston Grand are the large young artist programs in the United States where you have a multitude of young, very talented singers who are eager to advance in their careers. So let me just put one more piece onto this, and that is that going to see the young artists in Europe is less productive because the programs are much smaller and they generally don't do the condensed programs there. It's a full year or even 2-year program. Seeing one of them on the stage might be a possibility, but of course they're smaller roles, and you know, that would be honestly not worth our time to just go to hear one young artist sing in a smaller role. There's so much talent out there, and it's heartbreaking for all of us to see how many of these young singers are not given a crack in hell, if you will. Sorry for saying that, but it's just really frustrating.
Definitely didn't travel as much, but I plan to hear every of the ones you just mentioned. I heard the Lindemans, I heard the Washington lot. Of course, we heard many of them in competitions as well. And yeah, it's actually from my side, it's interesting what you say about the studio. It's like building the studio is something that I'm sort of taking a lot of time and pride in doing. It's something I love doing. When premieres happen, I try and set up an audition. But if anybody ever wants to hear our young artists, you're always welcome, and I will set up an audition especially for you.
That's a real opportunity for us to catch talent and then to move things down the road. So thank you for doing this. Put us on your list. Absolutely.
Would it be interesting for houses if some large audition days were set up where you could hear 30 singers in a day?
For me, absolutely. And if I then have the chance to hear 30, 40 people in 1 or 2 days and have to pay 2 or 3 nights in the hotel, it's absolutely worthwhile. An audition organized by an agency where I would presume that they have through certain stages of pre-selection, then I would say it's absolutely worthwhile.
Absolutely.
And so I'm a little bit hesitant to encourage the setting up of a mass audition day and to ask singers to come and go to all that great expense. I'm a little bit more on the side of when I go to a city, the singer that is close by that's able to come and meet and hear an audition when I'm in a city, it, for me is much more preferable than the personal guilt I feel at asking a bunch of young singers to come when I believe in short, clear emails. And as soon as you sign somebody, I really do. If you could just send the one line, I just signed this person from X, Y, and Z studio. They're very good. Here's one clear recording. And then we can be very honest about if it's going to be, if it's somebody that we would be interested in.
I said to my former company, these signing emails with like images and whatever, and it looks very flashy, but to be honest, it's not personalized. And given now I know the volume of emails, that just weeding through that is so difficult. So, I mean, I think the longer an email is, the less likely it is going to be read, unfortunately.
So it is the short hire, really?
Yeah.
Wow. So,
what I realize, and this is not a pandemic or a post-pandemic phenomenon, that middle-sized or especially the smaller houses started already a couple of years back to cut their ensemble. The ensembles get smaller and smaller, and the young singers have to sing more performances in more different roles and styles. So being a young singer in the moment or in the last 5, 6, 7 years, I think it's not really a funny job. Not speaking for the big houses, but the smaller ones and the middle-sized houses, I think the conditions for young singers are getting worse and worse.
I like personal meetings, and I trust that I think we all start from a place of we're all on the same team. I also think it's important for a house to show loyalty to those people. So just because somebody has a really phenomenal Gilda and they come in and tell you they're the best Gilda that was ever heard at the Met, we also have some that we build these relationships with. And I think when an artist delivers well for us, we have to keep engaging with them. And so it's to have that conversation and be told that you're the only house in the world that's not taking so-and-so.
Yeah, absolutely. In the past years, I tried to adapt especially the guest fees, but also go for the ensemble members to go with the inflation. But in the moment, I can't. I just can't, because in Austria it's in the moment 10 to 11%, and this is far beyond our possibilities.
I can't tell you the number of houses that have said, you know, I'm sorry, we have to cut the fees. Artists are seeing that as they're the last person on the totem pole. We've all had singers come to us and say, is this going to turn into a hobby for me?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's not necessarily a problem we have in Hamburg, but I am really aware of the fact that it's a problem in the world.
Could I ask whether reducing rehearsal period length in where practical could be taken into account to help reduce the outgoings that artists have to meet?
So all of the houses on the call are pretty short rehearsal period houses. And I think all of us pay rehearsal fees as well. The shortening of new production periods that's a long uphill climb. I mean, directors have so much influence right now in the business, which I think comes from the culture of dramaturgy and press, which has created this sort of mania around directors, which I don't think is healthy for the business, but that's my own problem.
I think people should at least try and look at whether artists need to be there the entire time if they're doing smaller roles. We certainly do that in our new productions because it saves money for us too, actually. We're paying, you know, relatively high per diems for new productions. And
that's a great model. I think Erik's point, though, that the current influence wielded by directors of a certain level is hard to combat. And I was going to ask whether that also is an issue for you in casting sometimes. You have your
hugely. Erik and I think the same way about these things, but there's it's not easy. He says it's a large uphill struggle, and it is, because that's the way the system is at the moment.
This is something which should, where we can ask you, there are roles which absolutely has no sense that they're rehearsing as the others. And in this moment where really prices go up and fees go down, I think it is really important for the artist.
Markus, I fully agree with that. And I think that we, in general, try to be somewhat flexible with this. I will say the other side of that coin is we're doing a new War and Peace coming up right now. And everybody who has 3 lines says, oh, but do I really need to be there for the whole rehearsal period? And the answer is I'm afraid we need you to hold that whole time. We're going to pay you for that whole time, but we can't ask the directorial team to schedule around everybody's 3 lines.
This idea of letting directors have so much power in productions also is the equivalent of letting certain singers have so much power.
I don't think it's the singers that necessarily even have the power. I mean, certain singers, of course, sell halls, but I personally think there are very few people that do that.
I'm quite surprised of the power stage directors had even then.
I've maybe a silly question, but what are the things when you were artist manager you hated in theater directors, and what are the things now that you're theater directors you hate in agents?
Very good question. I hated it when people didn't get back to me, and now I don't get back to anyone. That's not true. I hate being chased. I hate people who don't think about the many things that we maybe also have to prioritize. I mean, I'm always thinking that, like, my priorities are not other people's priorities, and I try to keep that in my mind all the time as I work, and I just would appreciate that from certain people in return.
I mean, everybody on this call, we work with some of the nicest people in the world, no question, and I sometimes feel that we can be a little bit we hurt each other unintentionally by not being kind of direct and honest about things. It's not my nature. I'm from the Midwest, but to be very honest with people when I'm not, when it's not for us, and that I would appreciate more often that being met with, thank you for being honest, instead of, oh, what a pity, they were wonderful in Naples.
Yeah, what I hated the most, maybe casting directors who didn't come back to me after an audition. I think it's just fair to get the feedback, because you invest money, you invest your time, even if it's a short one. But I think you are obliged to give any reaction for somebody who made it to your house. I would say I'm still on the singer's side.
I think this is what the best sentence you said, and then the whole call we had now, you're still on the singer's side. And I think that's the reason why we're talking here. And that's the reason why we founded OMAI, is that we try as association, when we say we advocate for our business, I think honesty, what you said, is the most important thing.
Yeah, and not misconstruing that as well. It really is for me a real point of importance that if I say something about a singer, that it's construed exactly the way I said it and not used to hurt them. We are working for the singers, and the amount of damage that does to a person's mental health, their confidence, that, in a really tough industry. I mean, that's for me the first cause of any sort of secrecy or reluctance to give feedback on certain things.
I want to thank all three of you for joining us. We greatly appreciate the work that you're doing, the honesty that you give us. Many of the things you said today are helpful for managers, young and old, new and old. It really helps to have these conversations.
Thanks, Mitchell. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, everyone. This was really great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. And get well.
Silenzio, io son qui per giudicar. Io da lei